The stylus for the Go 7 series is supposed to be the absolute worst. But I took out my e-ink tablets drawing the other day and, well, I'm not overly worried about this pen. It seems to be working pretty well. And I really wanted to compare it to the XP pen and the Huion, but, well, just impossible to use in this bright sunlight. That's actually at its brightest. And very similar on the XP pen, again, is at its brightest, even in one of the ink modes. Color ink in full sun, yeah, it's just a million times better. Then I tried drawing on the Tab XC, which I was expecting to love, and it was going great. The stylus wasn't too bad, apart from the way that it kind of builds up that layer of the ink on top of another layer. But yeah, hold on to find out what happened next. It clearly isn't the same. So I think, let's talk about the stylus now. I think perhaps what's going on is that the grid, the actual capacitive grid in here, so capacitive pens, they use the same grid as the touch screen. So I think what's going on, I think that the capacitive grid in here is just a higher resolution capacitive grid. So I think that the touch grid on the Go 7 is just not as good. And I'm gonna just briefly bring out the Go 7. What I think is going on, I think that the capacitive grid on here is sort of wider, if that makes sense. There's fewer lines per inch of the capacitive grid. When you buy a drawing tablet, they don't just mention the pressure levels, they also mention another thing which I don't talk about too much, which is lines per inch. The Wacom stuff is like massive. It's like thousands of lines per inch. It's far more lines per inch than dots per inch, like on the screen. But when you build a touch screen, well, there's not a lot of point in making a touch grid, a touch digitizer. There's not a lot of point in making that have more lines per inch than sort of the thickness of your finger, because your stubby little finger is like pressing on buttons. And there's certainly not a lot of point in making it have a higher resolution on that capacitive grid than the actual pixels on the screen. I think maybe whatever the grid that they're using here, the touch grid has more lines per inch. So the touch grid itself has a higher resolution. Now, if you can imagine, right, so why does it make that funny, like jagged line? When you do the slow, can you see that? When you do the slow diagonals, and that's pretty well controlled actually for a capacitive grid. When you do the slow diagonals, what it's doing is it's sort of registering a position on this grid. Let's imagine we were zoomed right in and we were looking at this grid of wires, which literally when we touch them, it registers which of these little squares has been discharged. And when you go slowly across that, it's going to register in this, let's say, this position, then this position, then this position, then this position. And the computer is going to kind of work out a line between those. Now, the slower you go, the closer together those are. So if you go faster, let's say I went from this larger red dot to this larger red dot, then the line between them is actually going to end up straighter. It's sampling its position on that grid a certain number of times per second. And the higher number of samples it does per second, well, the higher like stress on the components it's going to be, the more processing it's going to have to do, but the better the resolution of that line is going to be. But the slower you go, then the more times it's picking up on this sort of rectilinear grid. And so it's sort of spending a bit of time wobbling off to the left in the X dimension, and then to the right in the X dimension, and then up a bit on the Y dimension and down a bit on the Y dimension. So it's not really going straight. The Wacom EMR grid is just a much higher resolution one than all of this. And I think that's one of the main things that's going on here. Here's the Tab XC screen under a microscope. You can see the top surface, you can see the color layer, and then you can see this grid of sort of diagonal wires. Now, when I switched over to the Go 7 color, you can't see that grid at all. You can still see the shiny top surface, then the color printed layer, no wire grid. So I don't think it's quite as simple as I was thinking in terms of there being two different resolutions of grid, but I do think there's definitely a different technology there. And then when you look on the Remarkable Pro, firstly you can see a very different construction of the actual pixels on the gallery free screen. You can just make out beneath that, you can just make out that diagonal grid of wires as well. So I think that's using a similar technology to the Tab XC. And then finally, here's the Note Air 4C, and you can see first of all it's got a much rougher top surface layer, and you can see it has that diagonal touch grid layer, and it has a Wacom layer as well, which I can't make out in the microscope images. It's either much too small to see at this point, or it's actually deeper within the stack, so I'm not sure, but you can see that diagonal grid there, which is part of the touch technology, I believe, and which the Go 7 doesn't have. So my hypothesis, at least, is it's that different technology coupled with a different sampling rate, most likely, which means the Go 7 active capacitive pen is so different to the Tab XC one. That means you do get the little logo turtle stuff here. Can you see my circles there, which aren't perfectly circular? I draw another one for you. You can see just a lot of times when my pen did definitely go around a little corner, but you can see it's taken the sort of diagonal up that grid rather than go a nice curve. But honestly, they've done quite a good job here. It's way better than your average capacitive stylus, right? It's way better than your average sort of USI or your Microsoft Pen protocol. It is. It's not bad for notes. I was expecting to hate this. I was like you and thinking, oh, it's ridiculous. And actually, I was really expecting to hate the thing with the haptic motor, the little vibration thing. And it starts off in this middle point here. And honestly, I didn't hate it. And then I thought, just turning that off straight away. So I turned it off and I thought, oh yeah, now I recognize that I'm writing on something slippy. Okay, this screen is slippy. And slippiness is not what you want, because slippy means that you have less control. Now, for some reason, this sort of trick of the brain that it's doing, for some reason, having that little bit of haptic feedback actually tricks your brain. I think it tricks me to go a bit slower into thinking that I'm writing on something with a bit of texture. You can see I've not got it on the highest mode. I've got it on this. If you put it down here at weak, you just can't feel it. But if you put it down here at strong, it's actually off-putting. Middle is okay, but I don't need a lot of it really. But actually they've done a good job again of that haptic feedback, and it does feel a bit like textured paper. Now, why do that? Why on earth do that? Okay, why not just put some textured paper on? Well, I think, yeah, I agree. Just put a textured surface on top. However, if you put a textured surface on top, then again, you're messing with that crispness of your lines, crispness of your e-ink. And I think if you want that textured surface, then go for a Note series device. If you want the best looking e-ink, the crispest possible e-ink, then go for a Tab series. So they've done a couple of things. They've managed to remove a layer. They don't have to have that Wacom layer on top. So actually, perhaps that's one of the reasons why it looks so blooming good. And they've managed to make it less expensive. You know, let's not forget, this is actually cheaper than the old Tab X. You know, because possibly they've gotten rid of that proprietary Wacom EMR. And I was thinking of how to put this about the haptic feedback, as I was really damning. And I think it is true. We don't really want the pen to shake. I don't want to feel the pen vibrating in my hand. I don't really want the pen to shake in my hand. I want a texture on my page to give me a bit of friction, to give me control. Now, there is no doubt this is not as nice a writing feel as on the Note Max or on any of the textured things. But actually, I think maybe they got it right here. And I think maybe they got it right in terms of what this device is aimed to be. And I think that maybe, yeah, I think you either buy a Tab device or you buy a Note Max. Now, hopefully I've got enough charge in the ink. What's this one called? Ink Sense, which doesn't make any sense at all. And now it's like tappy glass. You can feel it's quite soft as well here. I mean, hear that, quite soft compared to that. I mean, this is not as good. I think probably the battery is still a bit low. And perhaps I'm also writing on another screen, and perhaps all the magnetic fields are getting in each other's way. But this is just not as good. Okay for quick scribbles, for your shopping list and things like that. But no, this is far better. So it's a kind of like a scale of not good to acceptable to really good. And I think that's what you have to sort of understand. They've given you something to enable this to have not been a ridiculous price. I mean, what if many people were put off by the kind of price of this thing already, and e-ink tablets, none of them are cheap. What if we add Wacom to this and this now costs £1,000? I mean, maybe it wouldn't be quite that level, but still. There are Wacom EMR color 13.3 inch devices out there, but they don't have the 300 pixel per inch, 150 pixel per inch in color. They don't have the same screen as this. So I think this was a compromise they kind of had to do this time. And I know that it's kind of like, it's easy to be wound up, and exactly Thocco saying, well, yeah, Mooink has got the EMR, but it's got the 100 dots per inch resolution, which is just not as good. Okay, at this size, InkSense makes no sense. I've been using OneNote the whole time, yeah, not the whole time, but this is I've been backwards and forwards here. OneNote, I think this is very much a good use case of this. So yeah, I've been using this.
That's annoying. Boox really need to give us a proper drawing now. Otherwise I'm going back to pencils.
It was going really, really well, and I was starting to really enjoy making the marks with the stylus. It was accurate enough, the pressure levels were good enough, but then it's just become pretty unresponsive. It's weird. I think it's just when it gets to this amount of lines, it just slows down. And the whole tablet froze up after this, and I gave up. So yeah, the stylus is okay, but the actual Notes app just not fit for drawing, unfortunately. And Mashup Bikes, I haven't tried it, but I hate it. It's like, no, I definitely want Wacom EMR. Wacom EMR is great, and that, as I've said before, that kind of recipe of e-ink and Wacom EMR has done so well at the classic recipe that is just really, really good. When you use the capacitive grid, normally palm rejection is awful, but actually palm rejection is pretty solid. You'll probably see it happen ever so now, just occasionally, but really, normally with an ordinary kind of capacitive pen, you have to be really careful to put the pen down before you put your palm down. It's kind of habit you get of putting your pen nib down so that the screen knows, oh, they're writing, they don't want me to recognize their palm, but actually, generally, if it's a large surface, it tends to ignore your palm. Not always, but often. Okay, so generally, palm rejection is pretty good.